Hello everyone and welcome to the Bruno Galan Talk Show. If you like this video, please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel to not miss any future episodes. I also want to mention I have a Patreon page in the description down below for those who are interested in further supporting it. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Bruno Galan Talk Show, and I'm here today with my good friend John, and John is a storyteller, but a very, very specific kind of storyteller. There's levels to this. So with the internet, there has been a resurgence in the let's say the audio format of storytelling. So it used to be for a while now. Now I'm kind of showing my age because for a lot of young people now it's a long time thing that the internet does this. But when I was younger, audio used to be just like you would pick it up randomly on the radio at night in the car, or in my dad's car when I was a kid, or some people were so into it they would buy the tapes and the CDs. Like companies like Big Finish would do like Doctor Who stories when Doctor Who was no longer on TV, stuff like that. It was just such a specific demographic who was interested in, what, I don't want any visuals, I just want to listen to the story. And when the internet came along, there's kind of been like a resurgence in the audio only format of storytelling. So more and more people listen to audiobooks where someone just narrates the book while they're jogging or doing chores or whatever, or even audio dramas. And audio dramas are, and we're getting to John here, audio dramas are, it's not someone reading a book. You really have the dialogue between the characters, voice actors, sound effects. For example, I'm listening to the Sandman audio drama from Audible. It is amazing. Written by Neil Gaiman. It's crazy. You have like, I'm drawing a blank on the actor's name, James McAvoy doing the name of Morpheus. So it's just insane. So that's one form of storytelling. There's a second form of storytelling called tabletop role-playing games, like Dungeons and Dragons, where people play characters, they throw dice on a table, they tell us they improvise. It's improvisation with dice, if you will. John, care to tell me what amazing Frankenstein monster of a podcast you have?
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. It is a Frankenstein monster. So I'm trying to do basically an experiment in fiction, an experiment in storytelling, and maybe it's slightly beyond experiment. It feels like it's working. So maybe I can say I'm beyond experiment now, and more like into feeling out the nuances of the medium, maybe I can say. But essentially it's just like you said, it's partly an audio drama, as if you were reading, not reading, having a book read to you, and it's partly a tabletop role-playing game, so as if you were playing D&D or any other RPG with your friends, and kind of those two things collide, and where they crash together, that's where my show is. So it's a story that doesn't have a plot that's predetermined. It doesn't. So whatever page I'm reading, I don't really know what's going to happen on the next page because it doesn't exist yet, and it's partly determined randomly, just like in a game. But it's delivered like a book. It's like third person, omniscient viewpoint. So it really is. It's both. It's a hybrid between the two. It's a hard thing to understand for people that don't know what RPGs are, but it's even hard to understand for people who do, because it's more or less doesn't really exist. There's a couple of people doing similar things, but there's not really. This is either a really good thing or a really bad thing. There's no one else really doing what I'm doing.
And I want to say, for anyone who's a bit lost right now, don't worry. We're gonna clarify details as we go. It's just we can't cram too much information in one single go. We're gonna have to explain it piece by piece because of all these different factors that make John's show what it is. And I don't know if we mentioned it. It's called Tale of the Manticore. Tale, T-E-L-E. Could have been T-A-I-L, I guess, but it's Tale, T-A-L-E. But a role-playing game, normally tabletop role-playing game, and I hate saying tabletop in front of it because those came way before the computer RPGs. Right. I've lost that battle. I accept it. So tabletop role-playing games are normally a social game. someone doesn't play by themselves, they roll the dice with their friends, because you have the game master kind of being the referee of the game, kind of like portraying the world and the characters that are not played by the players. And then you have the players who only portray their own character. And the dice will determine what happens based on statistics. I don't want to get too in depth about that aspect, but just to give kind of like, I guess, a basic understanding of what the game is. So John does not do that because there's a lot of actual plays out there. Actual plays are when people play the game and either write a script afterward to dramatize it, or play live.
Right, like critical. Even people that don't know what D&D is, they think they know what the critical role is. It's that big, right?
I don't know. I don't know if most people do. I think it seems for people in the geek, sphere. But I mean, I'm not going right now because the pandemic is not over and I have like vulnerable people in my family. But let's, if I go to an MMA gym and I talk about critical role,
you're gonna get beat up.
That's already a given by going there, so that doesn't matter. But I mean, people are not gonna know what I'm talking about. If I go to work, it's and then again, like you go the other way. Sometimes when I'm playing games and people describe like their actions, I'm like, that doesn't work in a fight. But yeah, you know what really bugs me as a side note is in D&D, all those like kung fu based monks, and like with one leg, I know you don't like monks to begin with, but me, the thing, okay. So the monks are the martial artists in D&D, and now we might lose some people. We're going deep in the geek, but whatever. You know what I always thought, John? I know you don't like the monks because of the idea of like, how is someone going to punch and kick a dragon in the ankle? I get that. However, there's a character that I want to play at some point, and it has to be a monk or a similar type of martial artist, because in Dungeons and Dragons, spellcasters, wizards, magic users, they need to talk and move their arms to cast spells, right? So I have this idea of like this guy who specializes in hunting down wizards. And he just wrestle fucks them. Like he grapples them to the ground and they're just drawn in pounds. And the wizard's like trying to cast a spell, is getting punched in the face, or he gets his arm broken, like in an arm bar, or getting choked, he can speak his spells. So I just imagine like if does
he sound like Liam Neeson and say like, I have a very specific set of skills?
No, I imagine when we're like Khabib from like in the UFC, like just he's gonna smash you. I can't do the accent, but I just imagine like this, like specialist, like he hunts down wizards, and his way of doing things is just like grappling them, and they can't do anything, and then they're just in trouble. And I don't know, it just seems funny that
every other encounter he's just kind of hanging out in the back with a bag of popcorn. Is that what he does?
Well, I don't know, they can still use weapons and all that, but when the time comes to face a wizard, like they're not gonna use nunchucks or whatever, they're just gonna choke them. Or anyway, okay, we're getting way off track. So, John, this might happen often. This is what happens when D&D players meet. John, so your show is this thing that you do by yourself. You kind of like your own referee. You keep yourself in check. And what's really fun about your show is when you're listening to Tell the Manticore. In a way, I want to be transparent here. I've done some voice work for some of the episodes because John and I have collaborated on a few things online. And I have done some voice work for the show. I have a very specific accent in English. So if that character that I did a voice for ever happens to die, I don't know if I can do another character. I kind of like Christopher Lambert in Highlander. Like it's a very specific kind of character you can play when you're doing it in English. Have you ever seen
that? I took your accent and I just made it specific to a certain geographical area.
Thank you. Have you seen the original Highlander movie?
Happy Halloween, ladies.
Yeah. Oh my God, the Kurgan, Clancy Brown. When Connor McLeod, like Christopher Lambert, he's asked by the cop, like, where'd he come from? He's in many different places and he has this very weird accent thing.
Yeah.
That to me, that's my my idol when it comes to speaking English. But okay, so this show, you just do it by yourself. You just kind of like you write a setup, because you come up with a setup like, okay, so these are the enemies, this is their motivations, they're going to be here at that moment, unless and then you roll the dice by yourself. And what's fun is that as you're very open with the people listening to the show. When you listen to the show, what's really fun about it is you have these moments where you as the narrator are very open about, oh, I did not expect this, and it kind of adds this little. It just makes it different, because if your approach was to roll the dice, make it random, and then you just tell the story without acknowledging the nature of how you come up with this story, then there would be no point. I will almost say there's no point to it. But the way you do it is very interesting, because you have this clatter of the dice sound effect, and I think at some point you made a funny. I forgot what it was. I wish I could remember. I think it was one of your characters, like the magic user. What's her name again?
Umura.
Yeah. At some point, I think you rolled the dice, and you kind of. I don't know if there was a breeze in the story, or the dice fell the right way. I don't remember what it was, but you kind of made it in. You kind of made it was kind of a joke, but you kind of made it sound like the whirl affected the dice, or vice versa. It was really whimsical, and I haven't listened to all of the episodes. I've started listening, and then I'm like very self-centered way listen to the ones I'm in, but I hadn't heard that before. It's like sometimes you have these little whimsical moments where you kind of like acknowledge the nature of the show, like I didn't expect that. Was that something that kind of like grew from how you were doing it, or how did it take you to come up with that format? I mean,
the format kind of did evolve over time, because when I started out, oh boy, where do I even start? There's so many levels to the strangeness here, because it being a solo thing is also very unusual. Of course, you're no stranger to doing experimental stuff, because you do rotating DMs, which is also totally out there. And I
have a show. Yeah, I have a show. For context, I have a channel called Chronicles of Crimson Helm. It's actual play, so this is just we record a game of D&D. And what I did that was unusual is that even though it's my show, instead of me being the referee, I'm the single player, and I invite other people to be the referee in an ongoing story. That's the context, but I don't want to lose people too much. So
it's cool. I like how you flipped it, and you're being experimental and taking chances, which is cool. But yeah, anyway, to get back to the thing.
But there's a blogger called the Angry Piper who actually, he's very wise. The Angry Piper. If you Google it, I don't remember the link to. I'll put in the comments, or if I forget to do so, because it's going to be a long conversation. If you Google Angry Piper, he's a miniature painter. He actually is very smart. He left a comment and he said Bruno has found a way to have people run games for him. And you know what? That's pretty much why I started that show, just to be transparent. I was like, I'm going to be able to find cool people I want to play with, and go, hey, it's for the show,
That's right. Anyway, to answer the original question, all of those like asides and comments and reactions, they're real and they're genuine, but they happened days or maybe even a couple of weeks before they're recorded, and then even more time elapses before they're mixed together with all the sound effects and music and then published. So when I'm kind of the game part of the process, where I'm actually like playing a game and typing out script essentially as I'm playing, so I'll be at a keyboard, I'll have like my dice in hand, and when some game element comes up that requires a random roll, I make the rolls. The story moves on with whatever the results are and the interpretations are. And sometimes if they're surprising, like if there's a critical fail or a dice falls behind my desk or whatever, I might actually type into the script, hang on a minute, my dice fell on the floor.
Yes.
Give me a moment. Because I want it to feel real, and like that is real. It just didn't happen at the time. So when I come to record the episode, I'm now looking at the script. It's a few days old, and so I do have to kind of like act the reaction again.
Yes,
like,
yes.
Oh, natural 20. Oh, but it didn't just happen now. It happened, but it happened before.
Yes.
So I am recreating that, and I hope I don't lose the energy. It's all genuine, so I think that I try and put in those real details, because I don't want it to feel fake. It's not fake, but I want it to feel as real as possible and feel like a game. And you know what? Dice falling on the floor, that's what games are like. Dice going crooked, That's what real games are like, and I want it to feel genuine as much as possible, because it is a synthetic product, right? It really is like, it's very produced at the end of the day. It's written, it's edited, it's voiced over, then it's voice acted, and then there's music, and then there's sound effects. So it's quite a production, and I don't want to lose the feeling that it is underneath it all a game. And actually, that's why I expose all of the mechanics. You were talking about that before. Like, I want to have the engine hood open, and so that people can kind of have a simultaneous experience of hearing the story, but also understanding that there's a game mechanic running at the same time. Mm-hmm. There's a podcast out there. The name is escaping me right now, and basically it's somebody's D&D game that's being turned into short stories or long stories, but they've gone to great lengths to hide all of the mechanics.
Well, so you kind of lose the point of it.
You don't hear the die rolling, and you don't hear any kind of rule explanations or anything like that. And I found, because I ended up stopped listening to it.
Yeah,
I found, like, I missed it. Like,
I'm sure it can still be a great show, but then it no longer has to do with D&D, even though that's where the story originated. Not for the listener anyway.
Yeah.
Or tabletop role-playing games, whatever.
I want that stuff. Even in an actual play, and I listened to like a few of them.
Yeah.
If I can't hear the dice roll, if they say, okay, roll a whatever check, and then there's a pause, like, I want to hear the dice hit the table. And if I don't know, it loses something.
Interesting. I
think I don't know if we're exactly. I'm a bit older than you, maybe, but maybe you'll remember the older games where they would have a demo of the game, and it would be like a page of sample play. And as a kid, I loved those sample plays, and I wish they would go on and on and on. And I think some of the spirit of those sample plays, where like the mechanics are rolled right into essentially a narration or a script, some of that is I'm trying to capture that feeling too, of like, both. It's an example. It's almost like an example of play that you would find in a rule book. Not exactly, but there's that there.
There's a lot of that. And I know that a lot of, like, for example, like, there's an anime record of Lodoss War that started as novels in Japan, but before they were actually written novels, they were like transcripted D&D games. People just like recorded themselves and then they wrote them. So Lodoss War was. Yeah, that started as I don't remember. Like, look, there's a blog, a fellow who specializes in like tabletop RPGs from Japan, and like, it started in a magazine. It was this youth magazine or whatever, and someone started, like, they would record their D&D games, and then when they would write, they would really write the players arguing and stuff like that, not just what it wasn't like the Dragonlance novels where it's like, a D&D game, or I don't know if they played it or not. I don't remember. Or like someone like you said, they actually included that. So it's very similar to what you're doing, but in written format, and that became a whole franchise in Japan and worldwide. So I think it's very authentic. Now, one thing I have to ask you is, when you told your wife you were going to do that at the very beginning, when you started like playing by yourself with your computer, your dice, and writing, what was the conversation like when you explained it?
There is a real story here, because I mean, it's weird enough to say, honey, I'm gonna make a radio show where I play elf games by myself into a microphone for hours.
Yes,
that's already maybe a stretch, but it was much bigger than that for me, because
did she do a voice?
She did, but before that, I tried to do it on the sly, but I have to explain that, because I'm of a certain vintage where RPGs when I was a kid were like being a D&D player when I was a kid is the worst thing you could be. It was the worst bottommost rung of the nerd ladder. And so when I was in high school,
there's like Star Wars and Star Trek fans, and there's like D&D players.
Yeah, it was I think it was below Trekkie. I think it was below Trekkie, and that was very bad back then. Anyway, so wanting to be like a cool kid in a band in the grunge era, well, late '80s, early '90s,
Yeah.
I ended up first basically being a closet D&D player, and then just giving it up because I couldn't be both. Like I couldn't be a D&D player as a teenager and have any kind of social life outside of that D&D group of misfits.
Yeah.
And anyway, I've said this before. You had to be there. People think that they know. You can't know unless you're there. It was the worst thing. It was the worst thing to be. Anyway, so
I'm from the 90s. Like my high school was in the 90s, and even then, it's like that would be a whole other conversation in itself. But like people like the. I don't like, you know, people in their 20s have no idea. They really don't.
They have no
No.
idea. They've got it good.
Anyway. Yeah.
Back in my day. Anyway, so
and we are sounding like that, aren't we?
We are sounding like that. In this case, I will die on this hill because it's true. Anyway, so I gave it up. Because it was either D&D or everything else in a social life.
You had the potential to be cool, and you went for it.
Yeah. So I was in a band, for crying out loud. You couldn't be in a band that played D&D. Like, come on. Anyway, so I gave it up. I still kind of got my fix because I never didn't love it. So it was like, you know, Lord of the Rings. I gobbled that up, loved the movie and all that stuff. I even forgave Legolas for surfing down the nose of an elephant. I'm okay with that. That's fine. Game of Thrones came out. Yeah. Boy, that was a big game changer for me. But I would read fantasy novels and stuff like that. Hidden, of course. Yeah. Hidden. Oh. All of it was in the closet.
Yeah, anyway, someone's like, "Hey, John, what's this under your pile of porn magazines?" Nothing. Right. It's just porn. There's nothing underneath.
I tell you, once I was reading The Mists of Avalon, which it's not even an RPG thing. Anyway, one of my friends found it. They roasted me mercilessly. Really? Mercilessly. And it wasn't like a Dragonlance super geek kind of thing. It was, you know, I think like Arthurian legend. It's been a while since I read it, but I think it was like Arthur kind of stuff.
What year was that?
Late 90s. I want to say late 90s.
Really? In the late 90s, for me, that wasn't my experience. But then again, you know, I lived in Canada, so maybe no, you too. What am I saying? You're not American. You're in Canada.
At the time, I was in the States. But anyway.
Oh, that explains it.
Anyway, so
I'm joking. Americans. I love you.
I'm over it now because I'm old enough. I don't care what anybody thinks anymore. It's one of the great things about getting older. Anyway, so decades passed. Like 3 decades passed, and then I sort of discovered podcasts. And when you started off talking about this, and I still don't quite understand what it is that made podcasts jump into the spotlight. Because, I mean, it's not like they coincided with internet. I mean, Napster was happening in 2001, but I feel like podcasts did not pick up momentum until somewhere around, I don't know, 2013, 2014. And then I was very late to the party 5 years after that. I didn't discover podcasts until about 2019. And one of the first things I found was My Brother and Me, The Adventure Zone. Of course, a lot of people find that because it's hugely popular, and it's popular because it's really, really good. And for those that don't know it, you should listen to it. It's amazing. The Adventure Zone, it's a D&D game by 3 brothers who run a comedy show called My Brother and Me. And it's gonzo's silly RPG stuff. Actually, it's kind of the stuff that typically I don't like, but they're so funny and they're so smart, and they didn't just pull like a ton of laughs. They did, because they're so funny. But they also made it like extremely dramatic and hit like pathos and like bathos. Like they really dug very deep in this. And I listened to this show going, this is unbelievably good. Yeah. Even like, what if somebody did this in a Game of Thrones serious style? This would be the best thing I could imagine. I wonder if I could find that. I was new to podcasts, so I started like auditioning dozens and dozens and dozens of podcasts just randomly. Anything with RPG in the title, I would listen to it, but I would always inevitably end up deleting it after about 30 seconds because almost every single one of them, 99.999% of them, were an actual play which started out with, hey, let's introduce the characters. Hey, Jerry, who are you going to play? And Jerry would be like, well, I'm a wizard, but I have a hook for a hand and a spatula for a foot. And it would always be like some kind of goofy, not very funny comedy. And it was always that combination of, I'm going to out goofball the guy before me, but also be like desperately unfunny.
Yeah.
Like there were a lot of gnome barbarians, and there were a lot.
We're gonna get into that after. We're gonna get into the whole like how the mentality shifted. But please continue.
There's a lot of half orcs named like Grak, or like, hey, what's your character? I play a half orc barbarian named Grak, and they're not very stupid, but they're really really tough. And I just delete.
Yeah.
And so I was just going through those podcasts so quickly. But then eventually I found one, and it was a game changer for me, kind of in the same way that the Adventure Zone was. The Adventure Zone was very intelligent and super dramatic and emotional, and you were invested and just good. And the one that I found was called the Iron Realm, which you might be familiar with. And it was not super polished. And it was one guy doing a solo game and telling it like a story.
Mm-hmm.
And organized into sections. And I thought, this is it. And despite its flaws, because again, it was one guy putting it together, and you didn't get the sense that he had a studio. Later, I would find out he recorded it in his car, and it was just a labor of love. But I loved it. I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it, and it just captured my childhood like basic D&D experience. He was using basic as well, which is a system that I had abandoned when I was like 12. Anyway, so I started thinking maybe there was more like this, and I could find more like this, and I was searching and searching and searching. Essentially, I came up practically empty. Like this guy was the only one doing it, and I was like, there is so much potential here. There is so much potential to do more. No shade on what he's doing. I love his show, and it was a major inspiration for me. But basically, when the pandemic came and I was working from home like the rest of us, I started thinking, I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna make one. I have no reason not to make one. I've got a studio in my home. I've got 200 guitars here. I've got some studio experience. I've got a microphone that's worth $500, and like, why am I not doing this? I should do this. And so I thought, I'm going to do it. But of course, I have to do it in secret because I didn't want to tell my partner that I was a geek.
Wait. Pause on that. And I'm sorry, I said wife, but partner. I don't know if you're
either or.
Okay. But so wait. I need to go back on that. That. Your partner did not know about your.
Well, she probably had an affinity for Game of Thrones and had seen some fantasy novels, but I didn't talk about D&D because I didn't play it, and I didn't have any friends that. I certainly didn't have any friends that played it, so that wasn't ever in the conversation. These days, it's way too much in the conversation for her, I'm sure. But anyway, so I started trying to do it on the sly. So the first month or so, I was still in my classroom at school, and I would after the students left, I would set up a microphone, and I would try and record in my classroom, and it was like all reverb. It sounded terrible. The sheer hours that go into something like this, it was not sustainable. I didn't know because I didn't know what I was doing at the time. I didn't know how much time it would take or what the production potential of the thing was. But anyway, I was going to try and do it on the sly, but it didn't work at all. And then, of course, when the pandemic sent us all home, it was either like I come out of the closet to my partner about my RPG obsession, or I abandoned this idea. And so one day I kind of, so can I talk to you about something? And then of course she was like, yeah, I've known for years or whatever. And she was very cool about it. And so yeah, there I thought I was like, I think she heard me kind of like mumbling into a microphone, something like that, and so what the F is that? What is he doing in there? Anyway, luckily she completely was cool about it and even did a voice. And I got to say, like, there is no way I could be doing this if I had to try and do it like on the
In
fly.
secret.
Like,
That could be a sitcom.
yeah, I mean, boy, like every episode is like 20 hours of work. Like, I don't know where I'd be having to like get up at 4 a.m. and sneak it into the studio or something to get it done. But yeah, so that's the story of how I came out of the closet as an RPG geek to my partner. And of course, as usual, I was the last to know. She knew all along. Yeah.
John, I'm gonna flex a little bit here, but my current wife.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't remember which date, but within the first 5 dates.
Yeah.
One of the dates was I took her to a one of those like imagine we live in a world where this exists, a bar for like just social games.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
we live in that world now.
Yeah.
There's bars for that. Okay? Like, and you have like shelves of games, of tabletop games.
Yeah.
And
I got it.
And I ran a game for her. She wasn't a player. Like, this is like, I'm like, you know what? This is the kind of thing. Like, you better know this about me. No.
How did she end up in there? Did she just wander in off the street?
No. I mean, like, we had already had a few dates. Oh, okay. Not many. It's within the first 5 dates. Yeah. And yeah,
that is a flex. That's a big flex,
dude. Because me, I'm like, you know what? Like, all band-aids need to be ripped off. Like, this is, and maybe that's why it took me a long time to find the right one. But I'm always the kind of like, I'm always like, hey, this is what you get, okay? And
I ripped off my band-aid. I was, 40, mid-40s, but it happened. It did happen.
But yeah, I ran a game for her. I ran it, and I remember like there was even like 2 guys sitting on a table nearby.
Yeah. And
it kind of annoyed me that they sat in there because the place was pretty empty, and they went to like the people there sat were people pretty close, and then you become when you're playing a tabletop playing game, you become a bit self-conscious if there's people there who are not playing. Which is always why when people are like, hey, can they bring a friend or a partner to watch a game? I'm like, no, they got to play or they can come. That was always me as a referee. I'm very harsh on that.
Right.
I ran a game for her. She never became a player like I am or anything like that. It's not her thing, but she did enjoy the experience of trying it out. We have good memories of that character still. And so, but that's something. Yeah, we had a lot of fun actually.
And how does she feel about being referred to as your current wife?
Did I say it like that? Well,
you're gonna have to roll back the tape. Yeah.
The only one.
Forever. Forever. Yeah.
I think it's more of a thing where like it's like that's what she is now, and then she used to be a girlfriend and. I don't know. Like English is not my first language, okay, John?
No, yeah. Okay. Sure. Just hide behind that. Yeah.
This is my Game Master screen that I had behind. So that's kind of funny that and the other I remember the 2 guys sitting nearby. They knew what that was because they were looking at me like I had like done some like Herculean task there. Like like what I was doing was just out of this world. Like he's running a game for this girl here in this place. Like they
well, I mean,
girls they knew what it was because they were like
girls used to not play, right? I don't know what the magic year was where girls started to play RPGs, but when I was a kid, like none. It was dudes only.
Yeah. Oh my God, do I want to get into this? Times have changed, and I think also. I think what happened too is Well, like I think fantasy stuff became just more accessible for everyone with movies like Lord of the Rings, superhero movies, and all that. And then
Yeah. Yeah.
it was no longer understandable and accessible to the deeply obsessed with it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when I say deeply obsessed, not an insult. I'm talking about me. I'm talking about John. Like to anyone watching this, I'm really not like. I consider myself one of those people deeply obsessed with this stuff. But I think what happened then is in the same way that normal people like they can enjoy a Marvel movie, a Batman movie, they're never going to read a comic. They might
Right.
go on Wikipedia when they want to pretend they do or something. Um, but they just still enjoy those movies. So I think it's the same way. Like now, it's like people uh, felt like they didn't need to have read the Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien to play D&D, and then what happened is a lot of people found they enjoyed it.
Right.
And then also, I think that includes people with better social skills who spend more time doing other stuff and no. Look, I am including myself in the category. So if you want to be angry, That's your right. But I'm including myself in there. It took me a long time to have social skills. It's in my mid-30s, I think, when I finally pulled it off. So, so my point being, I think through that you had less awkward. I'm gonna say it. There were less awkward moments for women in gaming.
Yeah.
Now, I do think I'm not. Modern gaming to me is not this perfect paradise. It's not this like perfect ideal paradise because there's a lot of things that are happening that I find are very, very off in a different direction. But to stick to the subject at hand, even when I was in my early 20s, we're talking like early 2000s, I've seen some weird stuff whenever girls would join games, man. Like referees would get really weird. Like certain subject matters would really get into the games. Like suddenly, like every NPC was flirty, and now you're like, okay, this guy is like trying to channel his desire to flirt with women. And, through this game, and this is really creepy. And and you're like, that girl is never coming back to this game. And even I'm like, you know what? I think I'm done with this game because now I feel icky by association. Like these things were happening. Now I'm not saying it was everyone. And again, now these days it's being. I want to say though, I want to really point this out. I'm talking on a grand scale. However, also I don't want to be one of those who makes it seem like it was not an inclusive game. Like role-playing games were a very inclusive place. Just people are socially awkward, and so I guess what I would say is the people who were in it were often equally socially awkward wherever they were from. More normal people, if you want to call it that, they were just kind of creeped out by it, I think. So, however, it's very nuanced, it's very complex. So when I say, if I try to explain this in a very short story, people are going to be like, oh yeah, role-playing games used to be creepy towards women and towards anyone who wasn't like a cisgender white male. And no, that was not the case. However, it was for the deeply obsessed, and now it's not anymore. Therefore, it involves a lot more people. Once it involves more people, you can change what the game is about to fit the taste of different kinds of crowds. Women are very creative. They're very in touch with their imagination as well. And again, like now these days, I might get in trouble for having said something that's specific to women. I don't know, but
well, I think it was used to be mostly guys at the time for the same reason that like Star Trek conventions were mostly guys. It was because the people that participated, we did lack social skills. We didn't know how to act around people, and so we could have been doing anything, and there wouldn't have been any women around. It wasn't the game. It was nothing to do with the game.
I'm gonna give an example from a previous job I had. For me, whenever I'm a comic book reader, I don't like Batman in the sense that I like the Batman movies. I like them, but I like Batman. I've been reading Batman comics since I was 8. I know no one knows who Duke Thomas is. That's a character in the Bat family. The Signal, Cassandra Cain, the Batgirl of the 90s, and now I think she's back to being Batgirl. She's changed names a few times. Like I know these characters that have not been in movies. I mean, Cassandra Cain was in a movie, but it wasn't really the same character at all. So whatever. But I'm deep in the lore of the comic books. now I'm reading with months, like I'm months late on my pile of comics because I'm a dad now. But basically, anytime I would find someone who's like reading the comics, I would always be very eager to interact with them for a very superficial reason, having someone to talk to that wasn't online,
Sure.
you know, about these
Yeah.
things. And so at work at some point, I saw like there was this girl who had it was I don't remember if, I think it was a jacket. It was like the Killing Joke, and that to me is very specific.
Mhm.
And also with the stuff that happens in Killing Joke, for a girl to be wearing that, I feel like she has to be like deep in comic books to be wearing that. But I ask because you never know. Maybe someone just went, "Oh, Batman jacket," you know, online, and she was a comic book reader, and I was, "Oh, cool!" Like, and for me, it was just like a fun comic book reader. No, there was another guy at work who was the stereotypical old school geek, and he kind of overheard a conversation, and he joined in, and he didn't. Okay, this is kind of like I'm big into reading body language and analyzing people, and this comes from a lot of factors, like having been in different cultures in my life, and you kind of, because body language changes if you're in Spain or in Canada or if you travel to other countries, and so through the years I moved so much, you pick up on these things because you have to learn the body language of what's cool here, what's cool there. Amongst other things, and also my hyperactivity to help me socialize with people when I observe other cues than the ones I had maybe I gave myself time to notice. So it wasn't that the guy got flirty, he didn't get creepy with her or anything like that, but he got really excited. He got really, like, he was all over the place, flailing his arms. He was like so and I have to make this clear. It's not. I am not even implying that the guy had any intentions to flirt with a girl, or that he was like checking her out or anything like that. It was just the novelty of it for him. It was just like he was like a very old school kind of geek. And this is a few years ago, but he's about my age, you know. And so, and he was so all over the place and so like accidentally unpleasant to talk to. And even I was kind of like, I find it so cringy. And this was kind of interesting because now I kind of found myself avoided by association, because what choice did I have? You know, like, what was I going to do? Be mean to the guy, to be like, I'm not with him, you know, like, and so I kind of lost the opportunity to have someone to talk to comics about comics at work, because that guy, actually, the worst part about him is he just watched the cartoons. And then he would argue with me about like Talia al Ghul, how she really is, but like you haven't read the comics, you know, like. Which again, there's nothing wrong with that, but if you're going to pretend to be the deep expert, you know, like don't base it just on the cartoons. So, and I don't mean like the 90s one was really good, but I mean like the more recent cartoons, stuff like that. Wow, this is taking a long time. I feel like it's a subject matter. If you try to shorten it, you're gonna really not explain it correctly. But it just, no one wants to be in that vibe of someone being so excited that you're there that they're losing their mind. It's not pleasant.
Right.
I've had it happen to me. How can I put this without sounding like an arrogant prick or something? I guess some group at some point, they had noticed also that I had a social life. I did stuff that they considered cool, and then I tried to join a game, and they were kind of like so excited to have someone like me in that game that I felt the same way. Okay, so it's not. I'm not saying the guy was creepy. I'm just saying, like, when people get overly excited that you're there, it becomes very unpleasant. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah,
it's just
because they're like hyper aware of you and stuff, right?
Yeah, and then there's these expectations. Like I don't think any girl wants to be like the girl that's going to talk about this. I don't think, and I don't, as a guy, don't. If I join the game, I don't want to be the guy that some people are in that specific case, and it's going to sound like I'm kind of bragging, but it's the reality of what happened in that moment. Like, I don't want to be the guy through which they channel their inner desires about how they wish they had a social life, or they did cool stuff, you know, stuff they consider like manly or cool, like, you know, I do combat sports. I have a few stories of having defended people in real life situations. I social, you know, before the pandemic, and you know, I used to socialize with people. You don't want to be that person. I'm taking too long to explain this. You know, I'm so afraid on some level. I'm going to say something that's going to be
I get it. I think, like, imagine you were like, imagine you're Vin Diesel. Imagine you're Vin Diesel, and then somebody is like, "Hey, man, you're Vin Diesel. You play D&D, don't you?" And, yeah, I play D&D. And then, hey, would you like to join our group? And let's say in some bizarre universe, Vin Diesel is like, "Okay, I'll do that." Could you imagine like that feeling like a normal? Like, do you think Vin Diesel could possibly feel outside of the context of sitting around with a bunch of celebrity rich people? Like he would, like everybody would be hyper aware of him all the time to the point where I don't think anybody could possibly enjoy themselves because they would just be kind of fanboying and starstruck. And I think it's kind of the same kind of thing. It's a matter of degree, of course, but I think it's probably the same kind of thing. Actually, I think I have seen like a Diesel thing.
And and he was so rusty. Like I don't know if it was because the pressure of being on camera or
everybody telling him like how awesome he is, no matter what he says. Like, I mean, I'm sure I'd do the same thing if I was sitting beside Vin Diesel. I'd be like, "Yeah, man, that's so great." But I imagine he can't just have a normal gaming experience like you or I could, because people are just too aware of him. He's just shining way too bright for anybody to like sit beside and be normal.
Yeah, I guess I mean, I kind of hate that I use myself as an example here because it was such a, I don't know. I'm sure it came out wrong. You know, I'm sure my example came out wrong. But
I get it.
But you know, it's just I don't remember how we started with this, but. Okay, I'll have to say that it's never been. However, I want to point this out. It's never been a place that was close to different people. It was just kind of like anyone normal would be creeped out by it. But if you were
wasn't close to anybody, it's just anybody normal wouldn't want to be anywhere near.
Exactly. It. But if you were, however, any weirdo from any creed, background, identity, or you know, and again, like, of course, like the thing is that I will accept any story, good or bad, from the old days of gaming. Anyone who had a good or bad story, I will accept all of them because there's different experiences. And what I hate is that there's younger people these days who are rewriting history. They were never there. They're elaborating what they think happened, and they're like, oh, like yeah, D&D used to be really intolerant. It was like, no, it wasn't. Come on.
It's silly. It's weird how political RPGs are. I mean, it's strange to me. Could you imagine if people had the kind of conversations that you see on Twitter about, because it just comes down to taste. I like this, I like that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, what I like is better than what you like. No, what I like is better than what you like.
Now, that's become what you like is immoral. That's become like what you like.
Right.
My interpretation of, for example, like if you play orcs as a purely evil race in D&D, like in Lord of the Rings movies, some people say, oh, orcs are actually this real life set group of people. And by making these non-human monsters evil, you're being real life racist. And that's like, no, it doesn't work. The Daleks and Doctor Who.
They're projecting their own ideas.
Yes. Yeah, because orcs are shorthand for a lot of stuff. The Dalek in Doctor Who, the Daleks are shorthand for fascist ideology.
Yeah.
Like, that's a whole evil alien race, but actually they represent, the Daleks represent in Doctor Who, they represent intolerance. When the Doctor fights the Daleks, the Doctor is not being intolerant because he hates all the Daleks or he goes against them. Like it's a representation of the Doctor fighting a personified intolerance. It's the opposite. So when you're fighting off orcs in D&D, you're fighting off savage behavior. You're fighting off like violence. You're against other people, and and now it's like everything is twisted. Everything is. And I'm not saying that in old books you can find stuff like, oh well, that was not very well thought of. You know, like of course if you find any old material, movie, like I love action movies from the 80s, but anything there was a gay character there, like the representation of the gay character was awful. Like stuff in the past was what it was, but it doesn't mean the hobby itself as a whole was successful. That's not what it means. It just means the internet wasn't a thing. People were not as interconnected. Culture did not cross-pollinate as much. So also, if you want to say how come D&D was only this group of people, there was less cross-pollination of culture as well. So any stories good or bad I'll take, but it has to be from people who are actually there. I will not accept any stories of bad stuff that's from people who are not even there. And to give an example of how scared some people are now of expressing opinion for anything they like, your own show, at the beginning of the show, the very first episode, there's mentions of sexual assault in the story.
Yes.
It never goes into tasteless detail, but the character and the way you portray it is very serious. The character is affected in the way that they should be. It's not titillating. It's not cheap.
Yeah.
The character is affected as someone would be, and there's there's character. There's a lot of characterization there. I see that you included that to. I have the theory that you really wanted to state right away. Look, this is going to be more serious, and I don't know. You can talk about that after, but
yeah.
I think you just wanted to make a statement, and I saw at some point on Twitter someone praising your show, but it was a thread, but half of that thread might have been like the person stating that, however, they disagreed with the inclusion of that in the show, and that despite it they liked it, but they wouldn't have done it. And the person went in circles just to basically say that they're not for sexual assault. You know what I mean? Like, because including a fictional story to make to maybe make a statement about, the story's going to be serious and adult.
Sure.
And that person praised you, but I could tell in reading it that person was afraid that by saying I like this show, someone else is going to show up later. Oh,
cancel
you like
them.
the show where cancel them. Oh, you like the show where sexual assault was mentioned. Therefore, you are toxic, which is insane. It's not a healthy way to look at life at all. Like, that's not how you approach fiction. And when I watch people go see Quentin Tarantino movies where horrible stuff happens all the time, and no one is no one is doing stuff to people like Marcellus Wallace in Pulp Fiction, it's it still gets a nervous chuckle out of me. That scene was, but
even like Game of Thrones, which is not far from RPG, the RPG world. The stuff that's detailed in that is like way beyond anything that I'm doing. There's every taboo is basically explored in that, and I mean that's sort of forgiven and tolerated as a work of fiction.
I don't know what it is about the role-playing games. It's kind of like, and I on some level, because I have different hobbies and I hang out with different kinds of people, and I'm able also to be involved in conversations with people who are not going to agree with me on everything, and I can live with that, But when I go to MMA gyms, like, let's say that overall I'm pretty left wing, but I guess I could say that the majority of people around me in those places will be more right wing. That's fair to say, And I haven't caught on fire by being near them. Like, they haven't done anything bad to me. Anyway, but my point being, part of me, through being someone pretty much on the left, very progressive, and I do want to say sometimes, and I know it's going to be taken the wrong way, but I do want to say you need to toughen up. Like, sometimes I look at people, and some people say, "Oh yeah, sure, you're an older guy." I mean, I'm almost 40 now. That's what you all say. But I really think that the tabletop RPG scene has become soft. But not I don't mean that you should go out trying to traumatize your players in games. That's really not what I mean. But it's just like, where does it stop, right? Like, and how come it's just this hobby? How come movies are fine? How come comic books are fine? How come, although in comic books, there's a writer, they keep trying to find problems with him, but he doesn't do anything wrong, but they keep trying. Like, I'm not going to get into that because it would take too much time, but
there's a cartoonishness, and again, this is just taste, so I'm not going to say it's right or wrong. This is what I observe. There's a cartoonishness to the RPG, to the most popular RPGs, I guess is what I would say. That, again, it's just not my taste, but I've noticed it's there. It's almost like anime influenced, almost. I'm not sure what all the like turtles, like there's a cuteness, like there's a kawaii kind of influence that I'm seeing in some actual plays and stuff. And sometimes it gets weird because I feel like it doesn't always mix well with.
They're starting to like, yeah, they do like
role-playing
dating story. It becomes a romance story more than anything else.
Or there's some like some really cute character who's kind of like, you know, says something really cute with a cute, funny cartoon voice, and then in the combat they smash somebody in the face with a mace, and you know their skull shatters, and it's a weird contrast to me between like ultra cute and like extreme violence, which I've seen this a few times now. It's a bizarre thing because like a game like D&D and its clones, they're social games, of course, but they're also partly combat games. Like that's that's a killer whether you use it or not. That's kind of baked into the system. There's violence in them.
Yeah, and I want to clarify, it's not in the sense of like a good, like it depends who writes the character, but Harley Quinn, when well written, or Deadpool, like they're characters that, like, depending who writes them, they can be really good or really bad.
Right.
But we're not talking about that. We're not talking about like characters are goofy but self-aware and whatever. Like the violence is contrasted with goofiness on purpose. Mm-hmm. We're talking about a dissonance in the and how the material is approached. There's a thematic dissonance. It doesn't fit. It doesn't.
That's a great way of putting it. And again, it's just a taste thing for me. It just doesn't scratch the itch for like, it doesn't satisfy me in that way. Yeah.
But it's like there's many games that could have served the purpose of the kind of game style they want to do, but instead they grabbed D&D and they kind of like contorted it, they twisted it into a shape that it doesn't really fit D&D.
You can see it in the artwork, because a lot of artwork has that cute cartoon like manga kind of look to it.
And but I want to say,
just not my taste.
I want to say though, when we talk about anime, Mike, I know what you mean, the kawaii style, the cute style. However,
I started playing Goblin Slayer. Like Goblin Slayer, badass.
I was about to say Lotus War, Goblins, Berserk. Oh my God, Berserk! Right. Such a tragedy for Miura, the creator, that he passed on. Yeah. In that, Berserk is very dark, and but so to try to stick on point, I want to say though, I started playing D&D with 3rd edition, and that one was very anime influenced, but it was kind of like anime in the sense of high action characters carrying like a lot of gear, gigantic swords. It was less gritty, but then again, like still more gritty than 5th edition now, the current edition. So when we're talking about anime, we kind of mean the cute one, because the D&D I started playing was pretty much anime inspired, and at least partly. Although I've gone back to the version of the game that prefers Castles and Crusades. I think it hits the sweet spot between a modernized, unified mechanic and old school stuff, and you can use old school rules with it. Like it's not like it's so simple. The core is so simple. You can add whatever rules you want from whatever D&D version you want. Like I use the with Castles and Crusades, I use like advanced D&D 1st edition stuff. I use like basic stuff. Like I can grab sometimes. I don't even need to grab rules from the other books, but sometimes I like to mix things up and whatever. Anyway, I don't want to lose the viewers too much, but I've gone back to a simpler rule system. 3rd edition was very lots of rules and all that. But when we say anime inspired, because I want to give credit. In Japan, the animation in the 80s, late 80s, maybe 90s for sure, a lot of it was like you got a lot of D&D stuff before it was a thing in the West. Like you got a lot of material that was very D&D inspired. Or I'll try like D&D and you just erase the name and put another name, like Goblin Slayer, for example. It's a more modern example, a very dark one. So I want to give credit when we're talking about this. We're not talking about the anime that kind of gave us at a time where there was nothing in the West, before even Lord of the Rings was a thing in movies, that gave us some like D&D like stuff to enjoy. But we're talking more like I don't know, like Hello Kitty stuff,
kind of. I can't
Totoro,
come up with names of these things.
Totoro's awesome, but it's not D&D. Like Totoro's awesome, it's not D&D. Like Studio Ghibli. So your show. Yeah, let's talk about that. Like that's really dark subject matter. The first episode, where you're just trying to make a statement.
Yeah.
Or
Well, I wonder, because the games I played as a kid, they weren't especially horror themed, and they definitely weren't kind of as adult as thematically as my show is now.
Yeah, but you can't scare your players now. It's bad. It's bad. Like the new Ravenloft book from D&D. Like if you scare your players, you shouldn't scare them.
Is that
bad
then?
It's in the book. Like the characters should be scared, not the players. So can you imagine telling that to someone who's gonna watch a horror movie? Like,
Right.
this, don't worry. This horror movie will not scare you. Don't worry. But I'm going there to be scared. Like,
only be frightened for the characters in the film, not personally. Yeah, that's
sorry.
that's philosophical.
Yeah.
Why did I get into that? I guess the simple answer is I was trying to write the story, not the story, write the story of the game I always wanted to play, I guess. And so for me, something like Game of Thrones, especially that one, because you got the sense in Game of Thrones very early that the characters could die and would die. And,
oh my God.
And that the writer was fearless.
Mm-hmm.
and that the end wasn't predetermined, and it was just going to be some kind of on the tracks kind of ride to see how they arrived from A to Z, and what interesting journey it would take. Like, you knew they were going to get to Z in almost any book or movie or whatever, but Game of Thrones changed the rules because A didn't always lead to Z. Sometimes A led to F, and then everything got effed up. Right?
It led to triangle. It led to square.
Right. And I love that. I thought that's why I loved Game of Thrones. It was in the genre that I loved, but also like that was courageous writing to me, daring writing, and exciting. Like, it felt like the characters had stakes. And so one of the reasons that I just again prefer older school models of play is that I want the characters to not be heroes, but to definitely be threatened and under real threat, and not a pretend threat where it looks like they're going to die, but at the last minute somebody grabs their hand and pulls them over the ledge. That helping hand might never come. Like, I want the threat to be real, and I want it to be randomly determined, and because that's what makes me care about characters. Because if I feel they've got plot armor and that essentially they can't die, and even if they do die, someone's going to resurrect them, or if I feel that could happen, like, I lose interest. I'm not invested. There's no excitement there. Actually, in my own game, without spoiling anything, I'm kind of getting to a high enough level with my characters in the game that I'm going to have to eventually answer the question, raise dead spell. Do I cut it out? Because I kind of think I might cut it out.
Game of Thrones had it, though. Game of Thrones had it.
Oh, no, Game of Thrones had too much of it, actually. To me, that was disappointing.
Okay.
And in any D&D game, as soon as that ability comes into play, something gets lost for me. I almost feel like that I might cut it. I'm not sure yet. I'm just that's kind of what's going through my head now.
The way I
reaching the end.
Yeah, the way I kind of handle it in my game is I'm not gonna put a lot of NPCs out there who can do it, and they're not gonna be in the same city.
Right.
And I don't care what the books say. There's supposed to be this cleric of this level per. I will not make it a usual thing, and then unless the group is composed of like 4 clerics who can do it, like it's one character in the group, right? But if that character gets killed, no one else. So to me, it's kind of like, okay, this is a resource you have, but it's not unlimited. I think if it gets to being unlimited, I don't mind it happening. I just would hate it if there's no way it can't happen. Did I phrase that correctly? Okay, yeah. If there is like, no matter what happens, like, it's fine, like, we're gonna survive. Like a total party kill is still a total party kill if there's no NPC cleric to show up and just revive everyone, right? So if also, even in games, like, I'm actually kind of good at coming up with some really messed up stuff. Like, Even if they have a helpful NPC or whatever, like if someone dies in a place where they can't get back to the corpse, and I'm avoiding telling a story from because that would take too long, but I kind of come up with creative stuff as well, I guess, that were like, if you go, like if the corpse falls down a cavern, and just recovering the corpse by itself, and then like most early versions of the spell require you to do it within a certain amount of time as well. So I find that as long as you keep it to a rare NPC and just like whatever player gets to have it, I don't think it's game breaking. The problem is when you actually follow the books, very often the rule books are going to give like way too large amount of clerics who could be helpful and could do it.
It makes me start to question the universe, because if that exists as a resource that is accessible, what king or queen wouldn't have that in place it makes me start to ask a lot of questions that are hard to answer, and I want the world that my PCs to live in to feel believable to a degree. I mean, it's a fantasy world. It's not. There's going to be some plot, but we can forgive some stuff. But I want to feel like it holds together somehow.
But what I hate is the argument, when people want to dismiss a legit question about the believability of a fictional world. Yeah. And they go like, for example, some people criticize the way women are treated in Game of Thrones. And other people say, well, that's how women were treated in medieval times. But then some people say something like, well, it's not the real world. The writer didn't have to do it. And also there's dragons in it. And it's such a stupid argument. The idea that, because there's dragons in it or because there's magic, like then no logic at all can apply. Anything goes, and that's something that even bringing his name. I got another person I collaborated with in a few videos, game designer James Desborough, who got into a lot of trouble arguing with people. I don't always agree with him, I want to say, but I like the guy, but I don't always agree with him. But he got a lot of trouble arguing about these things, like, because, the game has become so, I'm going to put this, so soft that even in the fictional world, some people think that it's real life intolerant if the dungeon that characters will explore are not wheelchair accessible.
Yeah.
So the bad guy has designed his dungeon to be wheelchair accessible. So he has facilitated the job for heroes to come kill him or her or whatever, which doesn't make sense, because if some people, if in real life, if a person in a wheelchair has a shotgun and I can escape through the stairs, I'm not going to keep running a straight line to keep it fair. I'm going to try to survive. So it's actually a compliment that I would use whatever I can to survive. It's actually a compliment. Right. I will take you seriously with your shotgun, and I'm going to run away from you. I'm not going to be like, well, what are you going to do? I'm going to take the stairs. So why would a bad guy with a dungeon, especially if the person is really evil and has no sense of like fair play, why would they do that? And so he's got into arguments with people about this, and a lot of people are telling him like, well, there's dragons, because there's a fantasy element. Why would you why would you create a world that is not like, good and nice for everyone, but then where are the bad guys? I don't understand. Like, you don't expect the bad guys to do bad guy things. It's which again is kind of like, it's become so soft in a way for a lot of people. But I have to remember, like, most people are not.
It's political, Weird RPGs are so weirdly hyper political.
I only see it on Twitter though. You know what I mean?
Twitter for sure, yeah.
Yeah,
but maybe that's more, it speaks more about Twitter than it does about RPGs.
But then again, a lot of conventions expect people to more and more, like the conventions are like, another touchy subject is the X card. Like if something uncomfortable comes up in play, you just pull an X card and everyone stops playing and doesn't explain anything.
Right.
And to me, the reason why I'm not for it, and again, I'm not someone who's trying to traumatize the players or anything like that. I'm not a psychopath. I shouldn't even say that, because there's a lot of people who don't harm others who are psychopaths. But I don't try to do those things. But to me, it's still real life. It's still interacting with people. Like if I'm at a workplace and two coworkers are talking about something I don't like, I don't expect to pull an extra and for them to just go silent and change the subject without going like, "What's going on?" And I don't think the not explaining yourself. I don't think like I don't think it makes you. I don't think it's healthy for people to behave like that. And it's like, oh, why would you ask people to explain their trauma? And well, if they're your friends that you're playing with, and there's trust, you should be able to at least be like, guys, I'm uncomfortable with this. If you're not even able to communicate this with your friends, and also I find it, oh my god, I don't know if I would get in trouble for saying this, but I find it's kind of weird how they can't even deal with it, and yet if something like that happens in a game, they can talk about it on Twitter forever. So how much of a thing is it really that you can't even express?
I don't know. It is a tough one. I got to say, I have zero real life experience with like an X card or lines.
Me neither.
These things. So
I
find that I can't personally comment on it because I've never even tried it, so I couldn't say like this is a good idea, this is not a good idea. But I think I get where it's coming from.
Yeah, it comes from a good place.
Right. It's supposed to make everybody have a better time.
Yeah.
As long as it wasn't abused or sort of used to kind of showboat for somebody, but it could be a good thing.
If a group wants to do it, that's cool. My issue is that now the dialogue is like, if you don't do it, you're bad.
Right. Actually, episode 0 is becoming something that's almost becoming like a given.
Episode 0 being the game where everyone before the game sits down to discuss what they're comfortable with or not. I'm not like, I don't know. I don't have strong opinions on episode 0. I think it's fine for people to discuss things.
I guess it's all right. Yeah, it would feel weird to me. Maybe this is showing my age, but it would feel so strange for me to show up to a game ready to go. Got my dice, got my pencil, got my graph paper,
and we're not going to play today.
We're not going to play today. We're just going to talk about when we do play.
Tell me about your feelings.
Would be like. Yeah, it almost feels like showing up to a baseball game with your glove and your bat and your ball, and then everybody just talking about what the game next week is going to be like. I don't know. Again, I haven't done it, so I shouldn't throw stones.
I haven't done it either. The only thing that's happened is more along the lines of if we ever use a system where character creation takes a long time, and maybe so we know that this game is going to be character creation, and the GM is going to kind of like prepare the game according to the characters that are made. That can happen, but in a game where character creation is faster, and I think in a way indirectly that has also made it so stories are more pre-planned, which kind of goes against the spirit of the old school way of doing things. I'm not saying it's not valid to pre-plan,
I think both of them can work. Sure, yeah.
Yeah, because people start discussing it so much, they have expectations. They throw it on the game master, and the game master is almost like, "Oh, my character, this is the backstory, and these are the." And you're gonna touch upon this, right?
Well, if you spend like 2 hours writing up a backstory, even if you spend half an hour writing up some kind of backstory, you don't want that character to die so easily. And I think a DM probably would be softer on those characters too, to kind of like let them survive if they feel like there's a big investment. So again, for me, like I prefer to like roll up your character in 60 seconds. And then let the story develop over time. Again, that's just a taste thing. I'm not saying it's a right way or a wrong way.
Definitely not. Like whatever works for people at their game table, that's the right way. Yeah. But it has become a bit of a what I would call a moral crisis, where people are crying wolf a lot, in my opinion. But if someone comes to a game of mine with a rich, deep backstory, first of all, I'm going to see if it fits with the setting I had in mind, because as the game master referee, at the end of the day, I'm the one who has to deal with it, so I'm allowed to say yes or no, of course. But also, like, yeah, sure, okay, if that's part of the world, cool. That does not protect the character in any way, though. So it's very possible that that character might die in the first game, and whatever backstory you had come up with in characters might still be in the world. Just not interact with the character at all. No, I'm okay with that. And the players better be ready for that.
Something. No, that's good. That's good. I like that.
Exactly. They did some work for me. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
But what I hate are backstories are kind of like backstories where the player really expects to live a long time because you have no guarantee of that. Like so. Right. it's cool to have a backstory like, oh, my own brother wants to kill me because of what happened there. But cool, like, you know,
That's good.
that's,
Yeah,
you know.
that's useful. That hands the DM some plot hooks. That's great.
But if the story is, oh, there's a prophecy about my character, and
Right.
and then you know what I do with that if I use it at all? The prophecy turns out to be a false thing, kind of like in Dune, you know. And maybe the player's really angry with me then. You know,
or sometimes you get a character who's like, my family is rich, but then you have to deal with, okay, do you have access to unlimited wealth?
No,
Does that,
I
does
don't
that change things?
Yeah, I don't do that. I don't allow people to. You start with the 3d6 times 10 gold pieces in D&D, and if you were to be rich, you would have had a different amount of money. You could be from a rich background and you lost everything. That's cool. But, it's, you know, it's subject matter I actually didn't really like. I don't know. Part of me is like reluctant to talk about it at this point, right? It's like, because you're like, you don't want to hear shitty takes on what you said, and like they take whatever times 10, you know, like
it all comes down to like, I like this, well, I like this, and we're really it's just a couple of guys talking about their taste.
But it used to be, it used to be like Trek versus Star Wars, like, so, oh, I like Spock, oh, you nerd, I like Chewbacca, you know, and then like people argue, but at least someone mocking your taste is pretty harmless at the end of the day. But someone questioning your character over what you prefer to do is where I think we've gone way too far. You know? Well, not we, but some people have gone way too far.
Luckily, and maybe it's because I don't get into any kind of political discourse on Twitter and whatnot. But
I kind of feel bad that I kind of brought it on the conversation.
No, that's fine. I mean, like, I'm a person. I've got opinions. They're as worthless as anyone else's. But luckily, the show that I make, I just wanted to stand on its own, kind of like Tolkien, and just say, like, this represents nothing. It's not an analog of anything. It is what it is. You like it, wonderful. Thank you for listening. If you don't like it, I understand. It's not for everybody. I mean, there's some nasty stuff going on. It's not. Some people don't like horror movies. You probably won't like my show. That's fine too. For me, I'm fortunate that been largely positive, and it hasn't ever become personal in a way where I felt like, do I have to worry about what I'm going to say now or anything like that? But like, obviously that is out there in social media. That's out there.
Oh yeah.
Anyone can see that. But I guess I'm fortunate in that I've avoided that so far.
I think the mistake sometimes is the mistake I had at the beginning when I was on Twitter was to think that when someone brought up a subject matter, it was that it was an invitation to talk about it. And I realized that it's not that. They want to be in this echo chamber. So now, like, you know, if I see a take I don't agree with it, just move on. And if it's really like, if it's something that I strongly disagree with, I just, like, you know, make sure to not see that again anymore. And I used to be very dismissive of this attitude of like, oh, just block what you don't want to see, because I thought, well, that's not how people should interact. That's not how conversation works. But then you see enough reactions. People are reacting like, oh, if you don't agree with me on every single thing, I cannot interact with you. And then you kind of, oh, okay, I see what it is. I spent a lot less time there. And just to give you an idea, the tabletop RPG scene to me is way more stressful, toxic, anemical, and whatever than when I go on MMA Twitter, I find it relaxing. Like, really? We're talking about the sport where like people like hit each other and strangle each other and like say awful things to each other, and the fans are like, you know, we're bloodthirsty. We like to see that stuff. Let's admit it.
Yeah.
And yet, I don't know. Maybe it's because it all gets like, when two fighters finally fight each other, there's a finality, at least for that night. You know, like if two fighters of different political opinions fight, and everyone's like, and the fans are like, oh, I like this guy because he's MAGA. I like this guy because he's Black Lives Matter, and they finally fight in the cage, and at least you have this conclusion that at least feels like, okay, tonight, at the very least, we kind of got a finality to it. Whereas, you know, in tabletop, you don't have any of that. And in MMA also, what I find is even when people go like, oh, that fighter has a shitty take, but he can fight well or she can fight well. Like there's also an acknowledgement of meritocracy, where you have fighters with really shitty takes, and a lot of fans like me who like. There's a lot of right-wing stuff in MMA and fighters, and it kind of fits them all, I guess, for a lot of them. I'm more left-wing, and yet I would never say, "Oh no, don't give the title shot to that guy because I don't like his political opinions." What I like about MMA is there's a meritocracy to it. There's, did that person deserve it for their work or not?
Right.
It's not, do I like them? Do I agree with them? Do I think they have shitty takes and stuff or not? No, it has nothing to do with my opinion. It's objectively the person. So I think tabletop RPGs will also like do very well with that mentality of, was this product good or not? There's limits. Obviously, that you know, like a fighter starts like hitting his wife or something. I'm not gonna back that person up, but if we're just talking about opinions and words, you know, and I think it's gonna, yeah, I don't know. It's I find it more relaxing because even though it's a lot more violent in theory, I find it less violent intellectually.
I would be very curious to go to a convention. It's something I've never done in my life.
I don't want to.
I'd be curious to know, like, what's the vibe like if you go to a convention. I'm curious. I'm gonna go to one as soon as I can. It seems like where I'm at right now in Toronto, I don't think Toronto's ready for that yet, just pandemic wise.
Yeah.
I don't think large assemblies are happening for a little while yet. So I think I'm going to be waiting, even just to get to a live table. I think I'm going to be waiting for a little while longer.
I want to go because I feel like even though I'm on the left, I feel like that this whole, it's become almost like you see a lot of, I'm going to go in deep with this, pro-communist stuff in tabletop RPG Twitter, and like a lot of people are very censorship trigger happy with censorship, and you know, like if you deal with dark subject matters and you don't do it in the following way that we all agree is the way to do it, with X cards and with these rules to approach these matters, and you're a bad guy who's trying to traumatize other people and all these things. And if you follow this other person on Twitter because this person has this shitty opinion, you are also complicit. Like, yeah, I don't want to do that. And then there's other conventions where not like just like kind of like very much going against that grain. But overall, I know that if I go there, I'm going to interact also with people who are very much on the right and not really, not that I would care to play a game, but the convention is so much based on the idea that, okay, let's do something else, that it's going to be too much in the other direction. Like I'm going to be with people I really don't agree with on many, many issues. I don't think I'll be comfortable at that level because again, if I sit at a table, I don't care if people are left or right, as long as it's not extreme, you know, like my father is Spanish, so I know very well when the right goes too far what it can do with Franco and fascism. And then my son is half Cambodian, so I'm gonna, at some point, I'll have to explain to Khmer Rouge to what happened to his grandparents. Right. So communism, like, you know, when stuff gets too extreme in one way or the other, and I feel, I don't know, it's so freaking weird. The tabletop RPG scene, it's like become this, or maybe it's the world in general, but again, like if I go to MMA Twitter, no, like if you say I like this fighter, no one's gonna go like, oh yeah, you like this fighter? Well, this is his opinion on this thing. Therefore, you must agree with this shitty opinion. Therefore, that also means that you must agree with this then, and like have this domino effect of assumptions. You know, like.
Because you have two like spheres to compare. I don't. The only Twitter I do is like RPG Twitter, but I will say that Twitter has a different feel to it than like an Instagram. Whereas Instagram feels only supportive, only like let's lift each other up. Whereas Twitter sometimes seems antagonistic. Like I just don't participate in anything that feels like a bait to an argument. I just don't participate. But I know what you're talking about because for a while back last summer, I was getting private messages from people saying, "Did you know that you're following so and so and they're a known whatever? You should unfollow them." And I thought, oh, that's tough because it feels like an ultimatum. It feels like
it is an ultimatum, and not only that, a lot of people don't even do a private message. They post about it, tag you, and and it is an ultimatum. It is shitty. Yeah. It's a shitty behavior. It's trying to inform someone. It's trying to, like, let's say like someone did really something wrong, where they legitimately have hateful beliefs. It's fine to message someone to, like, if I were to see you following someone that I really thought, oh my god, this person is actually an actual person who hurt other people.
Right. You're following Michael Jackson. Did you know you're following Michael Jackson? Do you know what he's done? Yeah.
Even then, look, innocent until proven guilty. Okay, I mean, that's stretching it, but I'll still say it. You know, I would perhaps message you like, oh, did you know that this guy actually murdered someone and has like, you know, there's a guy in the tabletop RPG scene who has murdered someone and has like neo-Nazi beliefs and stuff like that.
Right.
Right. I'm not gonna say the name. I don't even want to, propagate the name or whatever. But it's if I see someone following, even I, who never does that normally, might in a private message. But that's such a legitimate example of hatefulness and harm, you know. But a lot of it is fabricated, and I don't know if it's because people need to feel like they're fighting against. I think people want to feel like they're fighting the good fight, and in a world that's too. Well, I want to say too easy, but for other people, it's not that easy. So I shouldn't say that actually. But I just think that people at some point, you do, as someone who's defended people in real life, like in real life scenarios, or I physically defended people, yeah, you do feel good about yourself after. You feel like as a human being, you had a purpose to have been there that night, for example.
Right.
And I think it is a good feeling to know, you know what, I did something when it was time to do something. And I think a lot of people look for that feeling, but they look for it so much that they're going to fabricate the problem. You know, they're going to create that problem that they're seeking that feeling. Therefore, they need bad guys together. Like that night, it's kind of weird, right? You do this very unpleasant thing, which is finding another human being, verbally or physically, but then you feel really good about yourself because you were the good guy, you were a hero, right? You defended someone or you fought for a good cause, and it's kind of weird because in a way you're happy that it happened for you to be there. I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly. Again, it's so complex and nuanced, but
it's a really difficult topic. It's something that I hadn't fully dealt with or thought through until it's like in your face and somebody's DMing you, essentially saying you need to unfollow this person. And I think there's an implied, or there will be consequences.
But yeah, there's a lot of people who have blocked me for having collaborated with, for example, Genesis World. Like on Twitter, like some people have blocked me and never interacted with them. I just blocked them back. I don't worry about it. But that happens.
And I think for people like you and I, who we make a thing for free, we put a lot of effort into a thing and then we put it out there for free. Like I have a stake in my show, and I don't want to see it suffer because I made the wrong choice when given an ultimatum. So that felt like really stressful because I didn't feel like it was just me and my Twitter account. I don't care about that, but my show I actually do care, because it has its own little life right out there, and I would not want to see something bad happen to that. It's just a work of fiction. It doesn't have any political ideas. But like that one was interesting. Interesting isn't the right word. Uncomfortable is the right word. That was uncomfortable. And I'm glad that those messages kind of just stopped coming. Like I think I got 3 or 4 of them. It lasted for a couple of weeks, almost like a trending thing. And then they stopped. They just stopped coming. And boy, howdy, I'm glad they stopped coming, because I didn't enjoy that at all.
They test the waters. They test the waters to see if you're going to be fearful enough to comply.
If you do it, then maybe those messages never stop.
And if they test the waters. Are you going to comply? And then if you don't comply, are going to just like move on with it, or are you going to speak out against it? And if you speak out against it, then you're either like, oh, you're one of us, we're going to comply with our belief, or of how everyone should be on board with everything.
Right.
Or you're going to be the enemy, and but I think the same thing to do is, because you're not going to change anyone's mind on that platform. It's just to do your thing, and not, I no longer discuss things, because it's gonna, people start adding stuff you never said. Or and the platform is made for misunderstandings. They know that people are going to interact more passionately if there's a misunderstanding. They give you this limit of words, and then following conversation to others, the shittiest thing ever, because like the replies and the replies are, you don't have a clear, it's not like a
Sure.
forum with a clear thread. It's like you might
Right.
have a reply here, but then someone else wrote this here, and someone clicking here will not
Yeah.
see the other clarification there. It is just an awful place. And I
Yeah.
think my way of doing it now would be, if I really had a misunderstanding with someone, or a need to discuss it, would be, hey, you know what? Follow me on Insta. We're gonna go live and talk between us, like as people. If I
Right.
had to do it, that was how I would do it. But I'm not even gonna bother. But another thing too is, they pride themselves in not even talking to others. Like if someone says, "Hey, let's have a conversation," and they block and they go like, they mock the idea that your person reached out. Let's talk about this, which is again insane, because that's what you want people to do. You want people to communicate and understand each other, but apparently not.
Well,
So,
like you said, I don't think anyone's changing their mind
No.
because of some kind of Twitter exchange. I only see those kind of things being destructive,
Yeah.
or at best neutral. But I don't ever see anybody like achieving some kind of enlightenment or betterment because they were involved in some kind of Twitter feud. So for me, no thanks, not for me. For me, it's like I'm happy to talk about RPGs and games and stuff like that, but when it starts to feel hot topicy and politicky, I'm kind of check please, I'm gone.
Yeah. There's accounts I don't follow on Twitter because they do reblog and post a lot. Like I might follow their YouTube channel where they talk about purely games, but their Twitter, and okay, I'm on the left, so admittedly, a lot of people who are more on the right, like I look at their Twitter account, like I don't want to see that stuff, but I follow them on YouTube, because in YouTube they just stick to their role playing stuff,
Yeah.
So that's, and it's again on my MMA. I have another channel, Bruno's MMA show, where I have guests, and again, like some of the guests I have, like politically, there's strong disagreements between me and that person, but we're not there to talk about that. So I think that there's a sanity in being able to separate things. If I invite someone to talk about self-defense, that person has important knowledge to share with others.
Right.
It doesn't matter that we don't agree politically. Like if it doesn't, like if you're here to talk about how to make sure you're safe in a dangerous situation, why should it matter? Like it's just it doesn't matter. Nor does anyone expect it to matter. So again, it's just a weird environment, and I think part of it is because on some level, I'm gonna say this. You don't have to agree with me. You can stay completely silent if you want. But I think on some level our hobby does still attract people who, we're social weirdos. I think we are on some level.
I agree with you. People say it's popular now. You know what? I don't think it is. I think it's more popular. I think it's much more popular now.
Yeah.
I still think it's an outlier hobby.
If I mention that at a workplace, or again in the gym, or like, most people will be like, oh really? Like it's not, you no longer get the mockery, but you still get the or a lot of, I didn't figure you for someone who'd do that.
I think I'd be lucky to get that in my workplace. This could just be a hangover from the satanic panic that I lived through as a kid. But I feel like if people like at work found out that I had a podcast, I don't use my last name in my podcast purposely. I don't want my students and my coworkers to discover this. I think the reaction at best would be like, oh.
But it has to happen late. It has to happen sooner or later. Yeah. But it has to happen sooner or later, because students, like young people, like some of them will be geeks. Sooner or later, someone's going to see your face, right? Have you prepared yourself for that day?
I'm hoping to be retired by the time. So right now you're right. Eventually somebody's going to stumble upon it. But I mean, luckily I'm not as big as Critical Role or the Glass Cannon just yet. So my visibility isn't so much that I have to worry about it. But yeah, eventually somebody's going to recognize my voice or see my face on a YouTube show or something like that. And that's fine. Yes. That's fine. I'll own it when it happens, but I certainly am not. I'm not going to volunteer it, because I think at best it would be kind of like, oh, I thought that was
It's very funny. It's very funny. A lot of people have been like, really, you
Right.
you don't fit them.
The last
Yeah,
person.
I didn't imagine you like that. Like, yeah, well, it's kind of funny because like depending, and I guess you must also understand what I mean because you've been in a cool music band and all that, and you know,
Right,
when
more
people,
than ever, I couldn't, yeah, do the two. Definitely, you can't be in a cool band and do that.
well, you know, I am younger than you. I'm not young, but I'm younger than you. So I think I've transitioned to a moment where I could kind of like do two contradicting hobbies and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
I think what's funny is like people who meet you under one context would never imagine the other one, right? So
Right.
like you were doing the music, and they never imagined you were like deep down like like missing D&D and stuff like that.
Right.
Anyway.
Right. Definitely, and it would have ruined me back if that had come out.
Yeah. The advantage for me, like if I sit out in an MMA gym, like people are already trying to beat me up if I'm there, so it doesn't change anything.
Right, you're already going there.
We're gonna do this.
That's funny.
I'm joking. I want to mention as a side note, I'm joking a lot. Like in a good gym, people are not trying to knock each other out. I want to mention that, but we're gonna trade blows, so Anyway. Okay, John. Look, we're like over an hour and 30 minutes now.
I know. Look at that. Actually, you know what? I could talk RPGs all day long. I've got decades just stored up of conversation that I should have been having and that I wasn't. But you're right. It's getting late, and we should wrap it up.
I could do this forever, but we shouldn't.
You're right. Okay, so yeah, we'll wrap it here, and you know what? Thanks for having me on and everything like that. It's great to talk to you again.
Likewise, and you're always welcome back. And actually, that's let's try to do it again because I feel like you got more stuff to talk about. I'm sure.
Yeah, and you know what? We're not so far away from each other.
It's true.
One of these days, we're going to meet up.
John, I'm actually I'm in your province now. Yeah.
Oh, really? Where?
Yeah, I'm no longer in Quebec. I'm in the city of Ottawa.
Oh, you're closer then. Still, what's that? Like a good 4 hours for me, right? But still,
I'm moving. I'm moving in. I'm moving closer and closer, John. At some point, you're gonna like go to your house and you'll see your neighbor opening the door, and it'll be me. I'll be like, I'm coming.
All right, so sometime offline, you're gonna have to tell me how that ended up happening, how you ended up.
Oh yeah, for sure. But okay, I know I said we gotta cut it short, but what's kind of funny is like, back when John and I first talked, when he learned I was in the province of Quebec in 2020, and like with the pandemic, he's like, "Oh, it's pretty bad over there, huh?" And every Canadian I would talk to, learning I was in the province of Quebec, was kind of like, "Oh, you're in Quebec, huh? It's pretty bad." That was a conversation I had to have with every Canadian.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was funny. I just want to mention that. Okay. So the links for John's podcast are going to be in the comments, of course. If you like, even if you have no idea what D&D is, it is a really fun show to listen to, and you don't need to have knowledge of it to enjoy it. Just know that dice are going to determine random events, and I would recommend this show to anyone who likes audio plays, to anyone who likes fantasy, especially dark mature fantasy.
Game of Thrones, Goblin Slayer, that kind of thing. Yeah, if you like that sort of flavor.
Overall, good voice acting, except in the episodes that I managed to convince John to let me in.
I've edited you out already. I may as well tell you now. We're gonna fight later anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, let me say, by the way, voice acting not easy. Like I'm hearing the results. I'm like, I can do. I'm really thinking I have to practice this one. But I mean, I don't think it was like awful, but it was. I don't think it was great either. Okay. Anyway, okay, John. Thank you so much for coming and for talking about lots of stuff with me. And Tale of Manticore is amazing. And I think over time you're gonna inspire a lot of people to do stuff. And let me tell you, when I found your podcast and I was doing my little thing on my side, I was so happy because I was like, you know what, this is someone else also doing something a little bit like out of the box with the hobby, and I was kind of happy I found you. And then I reached out and I was like, I don't know, guys are already doing a podcast. I don't know if he's gonna like want to collaborate, and you did, and that was amazing, and I had a lot of fun. And we've been like chatting like pen pals since then, and so I just want to say I think you're a very positive influence in the online tabletop RPG community.
Thanks,
I think your podcast brings a lot of joy and entertainment to people, and you kind of show what can be done with the medium. And for that, I really want to congratulate you.
Cheers. Thank you so much. Thanks.
So everyone, thanks for watching. John, thanks for coming to the show.
All right. Thanks, Bruno.